I'm trying to think of how you start it.
Just be like, hi, I'm Ben, and I'm trans. Hi, I'm Robin, and I'm trans.
And then you're listening to Ben and Robin are trans.
Exactly,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll probably just be like, this week we're going to get religious. We're going to church, baby.
Amen. Hi, I'm Ben and I'm trans.
I'm Robin and I'm trans.
And you're listening to Ben and Robin Are Trans.
And this week we're going to get religious.
But before we do, we have a moment of trans joy. And since we're talking about the religious one, I guess the most relevant one to me is my moment of trans joy is that my father-in-law has finally just noped out of our lives in a way. And that is the most joyous thing that has happened to me in a long time.
Yes. He was immediately texting me about this last night. I was like, yes, nice.
Well, the most joyful part about it is that it's not at the cost of my mother-in-law, who's a wonderful woman.
Mm-hmm.
But like my husband had a talk with his mom, and it was basically like, we both love you, but your husband sucks, which we are going to get into a little bit of why today.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm bringing it up on this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But it did just happen last night, and I'm pretty happy that we get to keep my mother-in-law in our lives. Hopefully, I'm cautiously optimistic, without having to deal with him.
Yeah.
And that is very joyful for me.
That's incredibly joyful, yeah. We like to do these moments of joy at the top of every episode, as we say pretty much every time, because Ben and I try to be as like honest and open as possible, because it's great content, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And second, like we want to give a really good idea of what our experiences are like and the experiences of whatever guests that we have on, which means there's going to be a lot of highs and lows on every episode, like especially this one, because I don't know about you, but I have a lot of baggage in regards to this. But we're always going to put detailed trigger warnings in the episode notes kind of towards the bottom. So if you want to reference that first, there is never any judgment if you need to hit that pause button or that skip forward button at any time, or the stop and delete podcast episode button. Because like sometimes it can be too much for you. Like we get that. I have all kinds of the PTSD. And so like you got to take care of yourself. But I promise this is all going to be like really good content. We're just doing this because we think it's valuable and important. So
yeah, I know you definitely have a lot more baggage specifically related to this than I do. But I also have PTSD, so I completely understand. Like sometimes you just can't engage with a certain topic, and that is okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we 100% plan our recording schedule around this. Like I made a whole Venn diagram when we were planning out what to do today, which had on it like, what's the most triggering? What's the least triggering? So we can like balance it out and watch out for our own mental health so we don't like destroy our souls by the end of this.
I was laughing because I could hear Luffy's thumping onto the floor through my headphones. He's just a heckin' unit of a little orange man.
Mm-hmm. We love our podcasts.
If you'd like to see him jumping around and you're listening, check out YouTube or our Discord.
Yes. And I forgot to mention, we would love to hear your own trans moments of joy. And there's a couple ways you can do that. Like Ben was just saying, YouTube, get in that comment section. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm not a YouTuber until I guess now. But get in that comment section. Tell us what your moments of joy are. If it's something that you want to like put in the comments, but you don't want us to share in the podcast episode, just like mark that in there. Like, I want to share this, but don't put it on the air. But otherwise, like, we want to be able to share your stories. So you can do it on the YouTube comments. You can jump on our Discord, and there's a whole channel for moments of joy and your moments of trans euphoria and all that fun stuff.
There's a man sniffing my head.
So cute. They love the podcast.
Yeah, they're famous. Don't knock over my coffee.
Luffy's like, I'm going to be a star.
I like how we both know that this episode's going to suck, so we're just like vamping, like, oh. Because once we get into
Keep
it,
as many positives in as possible.
there's no saying how this is going to go once we get into it.
Yeah. All right. What's the best way to get into this big old topic?
I mean, do you want me to ask you about your religious background?
Oh my God, that's such a big question. Before we get into that, because I could talk for like 7 hours about this. What's your religious background?
So my religious background is I was raised by a Christian, in air quotes, father, and then an atheist mother.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad doesn't acknowledge my mom's atheism or anyone else's and just kind of operates under the assumption that everyone is Christian unless they are a different religion. And then he doesn't really take it seriously.
It's just the default of Christianity.
Yeah. But he won't go to church because he doesn't like being told, oh, buddy. I'll just start that sentence over. Yeah.
He's trying to stop the recording.
My dad doesn't go to church because he doesn't like to tithe. So like we went to a non-denominational Christian church when I was a toddler when we lived in Alaska because there was like nothing to do in Alaska. My dad was Navy, so we were stationed in Anchorage. So that was like their way of finding community was through the non-denominational church. But then once we moved to Virginia, I would go to vacation Bible school at a Baptist church in the summers. And then when I was in high school, I started dating a very religious guy, and I would go to church with him, and I got baptized as Baptist on my 16th birthday. But it was always very much like I was waiting to feel that connection with God, and it never came. And I never really believed in it, but I wanted to believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was never really that formal. But yeah, I got baptized on my 16th birthday. That was a choice I made.
Wow. Happy birthday to you.
Right? Reborn.
Yeah.
I'm the only person in my family who's been baptized, I think, including my dad, which I find interesting. But my mom said she's an atheist because by the time she was 4 or 5, 2 of her siblings had died, and one of them was like her protector.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, why would I believe in something that would just take my brother away?
Oh.
So I was kind of raised like with one parent being like, of course you believe in God. And my mom being like, I can't believe in a God because I don't feel like it's fair for him to do that. Or them or she. My mom would never say God is a woman, though.
Mm-hmm.
She's no Beyonce. But yeah, that's my direct experience with religion. And then my in-laws are evangelical Christians from the Midwest. They both have very different takes on it. Where my mother-in-law is much more of, Jesus says to love everyone, so I love everyone. And then my father-in-law is very, I know what God wants, so I will tell you how to live and you will listen, or I will tell you you deserve to die, which is great. Love it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Good way to win hearts and minds, right?
I mean, it's losing him a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
Which is his own business, but out of 3 children he's been involved in raising, he communicates with 0 as of yesterday.
Jeez.
So he's already had one wife leave him over it, and it seems like his current wife is thinking about it.
Certainly not fighting for it.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, should I go into more detail than that, or do you want to take a turn?
It's up to you. I think the whole Ben and Chris of it all, like the father-in-law story that'll probably be a whole, like, longer story in here, so maybe I should.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, it's been quite a few years since I think, even been in a church, honestly, which would be complicated at this point, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up going to church like at least twice a week or whatever, you know. My parents, like, extremely religious. We went to a really fundamentalist church growing up. Like, yeah, is like very fundamentalist. very, all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
You're organizing.
I'm organizing my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in there.
Oh, yeah. Just think of a bad adjective that could be related to Christianity and just throw it in. There it is.
Yeah, exactly. So like there was the combination of it being like extremely fundamentalist and everything that comes along with that. Also much more like sinister stuff. Just get the triggers out of the way now. Like they were very much, I don't know if harboring is the right word, but at the very least, like covering up and not reporting a lot of like predators and stuff like that. A lot of the people that I grew up with in that church, I haven't talked to for a long time. I don't really have a way to like check with people what they do and don't want out there. But I'll just say it, like most of the people who were also kids when we were kids going to that church, we all have very similar like signs of somebody who was abused, like how that manifests in you when you're an adult. Like in a lot of ways, we're all the same person, I'll just say. So it was like very rampant. There was a lot of covering up of things. And so like all of that was wrapped up in my church feelings and everything. When I was a kid, I was definitely a true believer, or at least trying to be, because I knew that's what you were supposed to be. And so like I did my best to believe in everything, but I hated being in that church for reasons that make more sense now. Just like really bad vibes all the time. And so like I was so uncomfortable being there all the time, but also I felt like it was the right thing to do. Like you got to go to church and stuff like that. So like I was always going and involved in everything. Not that it was an option, but had very complicated feelings about it. By the time I got to the end of high school, I wasn't really sure if I was going to keep going to church and stuff like once I left home. But then when I got to college, my first day or second day in college, I ended up meeting people from like the campus, like Christian fellowship group or whatever, and making good friends with a bunch of them. And so that kind of like ended up bringing me back in because I had like a bunch of like super nice friends that I was connecting to in college through this group. In retrospect, I think I got these like reinvigorated feelings about religion and everything, but a lot of that was also just having a large friend group for the first time in my life. Because I was always like 1 to 2 like close friend at a time, girly, for my whole life.
Yeah.
And like I had like by the end of high school, had a few friends that I spent a lot of time with, we were close to and everything. But this was the first time in my life that I like really felt accepted by a big group of people. And so I got very into it. I was like super involved with it for all of college. I was like worship leader. I was like very involved with leadership, like singing every week, doing my thing. And as I got further into college, some of the people that I was closer with earlier on were graduating and moving on to other things. A lot of those like friend relationships that were tied into my whole religious experience early on in college were going away. And I was having this crisis where it's like not necessarily linking the two things together, but I was like, how come I'm like not feeling God in the same way that I was before? How come I'm not feeling like these religious feelings anymore, however you wanted to describe it? And I think a lot of it was just not having those relationships that I had before that were like so like meaningful to me and everything.
Yeah.
So I ended up in this cycle of like what I know now as kind of like a religious addiction kind of thing. So I've heard other people talk about it, which is like really just you get that high from your religious experiences. And as things like, as it starts to die off for various reasons, you just like, what do I do to fix this? I need to find more intense like religious experiences and stuff like that. So I started like expanding, trying to, I don't know, getting into more like charismatic and like mystical and like more like intense groups like that.
Did you ever follow like faith healers?
Well, yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yes, not necessarily in the sense that people would think about it, but definitely the whole like big charismatic movement of like the gifts of the spirit and healing and prophecy and all that. It's very intense.
Yeah.
So I actually, for like the first couple of years of college, I was a film major, and I ended up dropping that and becoming a religion major because I was like so caught up in my religious experience, I guess, that I was like, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to like get into ministry, whatever that is. Like, I like made it my whole identity. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do this. Like, probably, I don't know, go to seminary or something. I don't know what my long-term plans were, but like, that's why I switched majors to that. I was not very good at that major. It was very interesting, but like, that was not like I struggled to get through those classes, honestly.
It's a lot to keep track of, especially if you're looking at multiple religions, which I imagine is part of the requirements for a religion major.
To some degree, like you can specialize too. But like by the time I got to the end of college, which I was in for 5 years, sounds like prison is in some ways, but I was in for 5 years. Like if I would have stayed another 1 or 2 semesters, just based on the classes I was taking and stuff, like I could have easily picked up like 3 more degrees because I had, through all the classes I was taking, been basically right on the edge of completing like a Jewish studies degree and a philosophy degree and like stuff like that. Cause I really was interested in learning a lot of different things and everything, but the major didn't really leave me in a place where I could like get a job out of this stuff later, unless I wanted to become like a professor or like go to seminary or law school or whatever.
Yeah, because for law school, you can have any degree.
Mm-hmm. Everybody in my major with me just went to law school. I did not. Not my vibe. But anyway, after I graduated college, I took a year just like I like worked at a bank. I wasn't doing anything with my major. And then I ended up getting like really interested in this church group or whatever you want to call it in Kansas City called IHOP KC, International House of Prayer.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. And so basically, that's kind of hard to describe, but it's in certain like charismatic circles or whatever, it's like an extremely like big thing, like really big ministry, if you want to call it.
Is it kind of like Hillsong?
It's like their main thing is they have like 24/7 like prayer room or whatever, where there's just like always people there. It was mostly younger people in their 20s and everything, like really a lot of people in a similar situation to me who were like fresh out of college or were about to go to college and like got into the stuff instead. That's a whole big thing that I could get into. But I did an internship with them. Like I worked for them for a year. Like I was on staff with this group. Things got weirder and weirder over time. Like definitely, I don't know if I would call it a cult with a capital C, but it was like very culty in a lot of ways. This is like a really interesting random thing that happened to me this year. So there's a podcast that I follow called Heaven Bent, and it's like every season they'll cover like a different religious group, which is a lot of like similar things, like churches that have become like controversial for one reason or another. But this past summer, I believe, they just happened to do like a whole season on IHOP KC, which was fascinating.
And do they usually only do one episode?
No.
Or it's whole seasons?
It's a whole season on like the same group. So like 6 episodes, 8 episodes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The person who does this is like, I think she's like a legit journalist, but it's like a full like research and interviewing people and everything. It was really interesting. I had been out of touch with everybody that I knew from when I was working there for like years and years, because we probably left 2009, 2010, something like that. It's been like a while at this point, but it was really interesting because they were interviewing all of these different people who were there, some like while I was there, some before and after and everything. But all of the stories were like bringing me back to a lot of the weird experiences and stuff from back there.
Yeah.
Just like, it was fascinating. But right as the season was ending, like as she was airing the final episode, all this stuff started coming out about Mike Bickle, the guy who like was the founder of the whole movement and everything. He's like the guy, like he's a huge star in like the charismatic circles and everything. He's like kind of a big deal. Anyway, it turns out for basically his entire life, he's like been like a predator, like grooming girls for like, yeah. He's got a history, and it was always within his churches and stuff, because like he's since like the 70s or something, when he's like probably 20 years old, he like became a pastor for the first time, or a youth pastor or something. It always starts out with the youth pastors. I wonder why.
Yeah. Oh, shocking.
All of the stuff started coming out, and the Heaven Bent podcast, like the season ended up like she started doing bonus episode after bonus episode, and it ended up being like a double season or whatever, because all of the stuff came out like at the end of it.
That's a lot of new info.
Yeah, it's wild. But I have been like reconnecting with some people from back then, because there's like a few people who were there back then also who have been posting about it on TikTok and social media and everything. And it's been really interesting to hear people's stories and reconnect with them and everything, because a lot of us have really similar stories. I feel like less crazy now.
Yeah.
Just like being able to unpack this stuff and everything. So like not every church is harboring child predators and stuff like that. Just all of the ones that I go to, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, there's like research into it, and I don't know the stats, but like a lot of pastors get into being pastors because they want that kind of power. Mm-hmm. And like there's a higher incidence of narcissistic pastors and like feeling like they're above the law, or maybe feeling like they have God-given privileges to things. Mm-hmm. And not all pastors, but like it's a higher proportion within like people who are in a position of power over a community, which is very scary. And it makes me very glad that I was not that involved in churches growing up. Because like my husband's cousins had not great experiences from their church community.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's Emily Joy Allison, something like that. I'll put it in the show notes, and we'll put all these like books and stuff that we reference up on the Discord too. But anyway, she wrote a book called Church 2, like hashtag Church 2.
Is it number 2 or TOO?
TOO.
Okay.
So like this came out like during or towards the end of the Me Too movement, and her and some other people started posting their like Me Too type stories about like sexual assault, specifically like about their experiences like in church growing up and youth groups and stuff like that. She ended up writing this book about it, in which she like did a lot of research and stuff, obviously, but she a lot of stuff that she talked about in it. Like I said, not every church is harboring predators. However, the ones that are, it's often like multiple people. Like if you find one there, like I was saying, like Mike Bickle, like the founder and leader of IHOP KC, he was one person, but there's been like a few others that have come out both before and after that. And I think now that people are kind of like looking under the rug, there's going to be like way more that come out. And so like I'm a little bit like nervously just like I know it's going to happen. And it's just like, who is it?
Yeah. And hopefully not anyone you were close to, because that would be a mind fuck.
Yeah. I didn't develop a lot of super close relationships there because it was also cliquey and stuff like that. And I don't think I was quite culty enough for my particular cult. So there's like a trend where if there's one predator in the church, there's normally multiple because they kind of group together and protect each other a lot of the times. And it can become like a safe space for them because they always have the option to like repent or whatever, or at least say that they are. And then anybody who knows about what they've done or whatever, a lot of the times will just like believe that their repentance is real and be like, all right, you're all good. You're serious. You've repented. You can go back into the children's ministry again or whatever.
So bad.
Or like, even if they get removed from like ministries, they're still in the same church. They're still like around the same people. It doesn't get reported to the police.
It's so scary because like this belief that because God is like the final arbiter of justice, that letting God deal with it is enough. But what about the victims, and what about accountability, and what about the law? Like,
yeah,
you're letting these kids, usually, because a lot of these predators will specifically choose children because they don't know enough about bad touching and stuff to know anything's going on. Like, then they see this person just get away with it once they know something bad happened to them. And like, that is so bad for their mental health and for them as adults.
I was a kid in church, like in the 90s, at the height of like purity culture and that whole movement and everything. But like purity culture really, it's almost like it was designed to enable this kind of thing because it often like puts all the guilt like on the victim and not the predator, especially like for young girls, because there's this whole idea that like, oh, all men are like perverts or whatever, essentially. Not how they would phrase it, but
it's on you to deter their lust by modifying your behavior instead of expecting them to be adults who have self-control.
Yeah. And like if you're like a 13-year-old girl and there's like adult men who are lusting after you, it's not because they're sexual predators or whatever. It's because you are dressed too provocatively or like whatever other reason. Like it's always your fault. So like a lot of times, even when people find out about these things, they end up like blaming the victim and don't do anything to the perpetrator.
That's a thing, not just in churches too. Like my mom was assaulted when she was a late teenager. And in like the investigation, they asked her what she was wearing when she got abducted. And she was like, jeans and a flannel, because I worked in a Western wear shop and I was walking to work. And they were like, well, are you sure? So like,
you must be misremembering. You're a hysterical woman.
Right? But like, it's just ridiculous to expect the victims. People shouldn't have to behave or dress in a certain way to protect themselves. Like, we should just be safe. People shouldn't be disgusting.
Yeah.
It's not that hard, but it's even worse in churches because of like it's like the promise ring to yourself thing. I never did that, but like you get engaged to yourself and like you belong to your dad until he hands you over, and like that's very, very churchy. It's so gross.
It's really gross.
Anyway, where were we?
Talking a lot about CSA,
Well,
purity culture.
Church sexual abuse, right? That's what it stands for.
Yeah. Clergy, sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
What is the one phrase that they have been using for Mike? It might just be like clergy abuse or religious abuse or whatever. There's like a lot there.
And it's not always clergy. Sometimes it's just church members who decide they want to be babysitters, and then you meet them through church. But like they'll go into your home and use that connection and that built-in trust.
Mm-hmm.
I have several people in my life that has happened to. It's just bad. Like the built-in trust. You should always be skeptical. You should always vet people and vibe check.
Mm-hmm.
The very Christian practice of vibe checking.
Yeah, they're always so good at it too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. I don't know how much I should say detail wise. I'm not going to give names and stuff like that, but like a couple of them were like in my family too. And I always wonder looking back, like who found who, like in this church community, like because this is pre-internet too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just like these people just like do networking like nothing else. They like find each other.
It's like the trans pheromones that we find each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's like creeps can do the same thing.
No, they absolutely can. But like we don't have to make the whole episode about this, but there is definitely a thing where once you've experienced trauma, especially sexual trauma, but really any kind of abuse, it imprints on you in ways that you're not necessarily aware of, especially like when you're in the heat of it and when you're younger. But like it affects everything about how you like bury yourself, how you present yourself, how you act in the world as a person. The people who are looking for more victims can like read that on you. Like it's very obvious. Like they're like, oh, that's somebody who's already had this happen. Like they're a good target,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So it's like a lightning always strikes twice situation.
And it's awful because no one should have to go through that. But for certain bad people to like re-traumatize, it's a nightmare. And like we said already, it's not everyone in churches. It's not every church. It's also not only in church. But it just shouldn't happen. And there's such a high correlation.
Yeah. So that's basically my personal church history. In a nutshell, that's the most concise version that I've ever given of my story, and that was like half an hour or something. But that church was kind of the last one on my journey, at least that I was involved with for any long period of time. Like not just because of that stuff, like a lot of that stuff I didn't even know about at the time necessarily. But I just like, it was a long journey, especially with all the like religious addiction related stuff. And I think I got to a point where I like tried every religious drug that was out there in the world, essentially. And I hit a point where I was like, maybe this isn't the problem. Maybe this isn't like what I need to, you know. And I think like being involved in that church at the end for all the bad stuff, it helped me like work through things at a much quicker pace, I guess, because it was just like so many just like extreme examples of everything that I needed to like work through and process and everything, that it's like just like right up front in front of you at all times. And so I just like did like a speed course of like working through my issues in a sense. Not that I'm not still working through my issues.
It's going to be a lifelong thing for both of us and a lot of our listeners. Hopefully we have listeners by now.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot wrapped up in it when it comes to being trans to put it mildly. And like, to be clear, that isn't the reason why I'm not like going to church or working for a church or whatever anymore. Like, that isn't like what brought everything to a head by any means. However, I do have a lot of like trauma specifically related to that, like both as a child and as an adult. Like, everything was really wrapped up in that, and like a lot of that is the reason that I ended up coming out so late in life, because like so much of that stuff was like internalized and everything. The last thing that I will share about my IHOP KC experience is that I found out like later down the line, after I had like left staff there, or at least like at the very end of that process, I found out that they very much do like conversion therapy. And there were a lot of queer people there, whether they were out or not. And I think when you're in that kind of environment, there's a lot of emphasis on like confessing your sins and stuff like that. Not that being queer is a sin, but it was in that world.
Yeah, in that context, it was considered as such.
Yeah. And so like people would either like come out voluntarily or be in these situations where nobody was technically like forcing you to confess things or whatever, but there was a lot of like pressure to. And so like eventually you end up coming out to somebody. I haven't thought about this in a long time, but wow. Okay. So this is coming back to me now.
It's all coming back. It's all coming back to me now.
It's all coming back to So the program that I was working for when I was on staff there, it was essentially like a smaller internship kind of program, like small groups of young people who were coming for like a 6-month program or whatever. I was basically just like the PA to the guy who was in charge of this like internship program. So I was there for like a lot of the like classes and stuff that these people were taking. Because I was like the sound girl a lot of the time and everything. But they would have different speakers come through at different times. And one of them, I have to look up what his name is because I'm like, I can't remember it anymore. But one of them was a like quote unquote like ex-gay guy. And he would, I don't remember what the specific topic was on his like lecture or whatever that he gave, but he talked about that. And then at the end, he just happened to do a like prayer thing and like confess something to somebody else here or something like that kind of thing. And I ended up kind of like coming out to this guy, to that particular like leader.
Wow.
At one point, I don't like, I kind of forget about this experience because, but I like did kind of just like quickly, because there's a lot of pressure. I'm like, I gotta say my thing. So like I told this guy. That was the extent of the relationship that I have with that guy. But anyway, he was the like leader of the like conversion program essentially that they had there. which I didn't realize at the time. After I quit working for the church, I left and got a job at a coffee shop. And like the one guy I work with was just like bitter about his dad all the time and like hated his dad. And I found out much like farther down the road that guy was my coworker's dad.
That's
I'm like, oh, no wonder.
Yeah, I'd be bitter about my dad too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am, but
yeah,
that would be a very different reason.
Yeah. But anyway, I found out way later down the line that a lot of people who were in my situation, who were kind of like either pushed into a confession or volunteered it, would, especially if they were on staff and wanted to remain on staff, would end up getting like voluntarily, not voluntarily pushed into like the little like gay conversion program or whatever. And like on that Heaven Bent podcast that I was talking about, like they did interview some people who went through that process, and it was like really crazy and traumatizing. And I really feel for those people. I'm glad that that part of it didn't happen to me, but yeah.
It makes me wonder if they actually would have pushed for you because like you weren't anywhere near ready to come out or transition. So like, I don't know if they would have seen that as particularly relevant because it's not like you were acting on it. But it's still scary.
I don't think that really matters.
Yeah.
None of these people were acting on it.
It's so scary. A lot of conversion therapists, like I follow some Mormon podcasts, and a lot of conversion therapists are ex-gays. And there's at least one prominent one through the Mormon church who recently like said that was actually a bad thing and I shouldn't have been doing that. But so many people don't come to that realization.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's the same person, but I think I know who you're talking about because I like saw an interview with that guy and somebody who like went through that program when he was younger and like ended up like reconnecting and confronting the guy and everything.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. We might have consumed the same media.
Yeah. There's definitely an overlap on our Venn diagram, much like your beautiful Venn diagram for our episode plan for today.
Yeah. I love ex-Mormons, though. They're the best.
Yeah. I've always had wonderful experiences interacting with ex-Mormons. Even current Mormon, like I've never interacted with Mormon leadership, but like they're very friendly people. Their church is it's something else. But the people are very friendly.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those kind of like high control group situations where I don't know like a ton of Mormons. I've known a good handful though. Both like in real life and just like from online. But it seems like if you grow up Mormon, once you get older and you're out in the world on your own, either you become like super diehard Mormon person or you like go completely the other way, like and leave the church. Like,
well, and the pandemic has had a lot of influence on people becoming no longer religious. And I think a lot of that ties back into you talking about like your religiosity coming from a community. It's like as soon as you're cut off from that community, you can actually examine how you really feel without influences from your peers.
mm-hmm.
And that can really make you reevaluate everything. And so like it's a mass exodus of all organized religion right now after the pandemic, which is a good thing for some people, probably sucks for some people because that might be their only form of community. But hopefully, because we're, living in the age of technology, they'll find their community.
Yeah. And the community aspect can be like legit. It can be a really good experience for people. The issue is just when you wrap everything up together and you don't realize like how your religious feelings and your community feelings are all wrapped up in each other. And then you lose one of those things and like, just, I don't know.
It can be very isolating.
Very isolating.
Should I show off my books and or describe them?
Oh my God, yes. And also, yeah, show off your books. And then we also need to get into your story with your father-in-law.
Yes. So my father-in-law, from the day I met him, has been very concerned about both my soul and my husband's soul. He thinks that me being trans is a fetish. He has brought up our sex life to me more than Chris and I have had sex. But one of the first things he gave me was this New Testament picture Bible with special selection on how you can become part of God's wonderful family.
Oh.
So it's like a graphic novel version of the New Testament. If you want to see it, you can see it on YouTube. And when this comes out, I'll try to remember to post pictures of it in the Discord. But
this is for like if you're an atheist just because you can't read good.
Exactly. Both Chris and I saw this and we got in the car and we were like, does he think we're queer because we can't read? He also, I don't have it anymore, but he gave me this, I guess it's like, I can't remember, something tracks, but it's like one of those little pamphlets. And it was, don't stub your toe, it might be the last thing you do. And it was like all about how it's because of God that if you stub your toe, you might not get an infection and then you won't die.
From stubbing your toe?
Yeah. It was literally called there's me on my Instagram doing a dramatic reading of it, a video in the car. But it's just like, if I stub my toe and it starts getting infected, I'll go get antibiotics. Like, what are you talking about? But then he also gives my husband stuff like On the Path of the Immortals, Exo Vaticana, Project Lucifer, and the strategic locations where entities await the appointed time. And it has like pictures of Mothman in it. And like, it's talking about like false gods. And there's a chapter called The Science of Portals. Secrets of the CERN Stargate. Like, it's conspiracy theories.
And also like, so I'm dying to know what it stands for, but when it says Project Lucifer on the cover, Lucifer is an acronym.
Yeah, it's L.U.C.I. Where's the Project Lucifer? But yeah, it's been very like, we're worried about your soul, blah, blah, blah. And he'll send me like Bible verses about, he doesn't think transness exists. And he'll tell me I'm a woman and he'll refuse to use my name or pronouns. But then he'll send me like the Bible verse about men sleeping with men as if it applies to me. And so then my husband was like, so now Ben's a man? And he was like, I didn't mean it like that.
I love being trans and gay because then people have to decide what the thing they're more offended by is.
Yeah. Where is Project Lucifer? I'm just going to Google it. But yeah, he also sent me Bible verses about how being gay means you deserve to be stoned to death and like that I deserve to die for being queer. And so it's
a good way to convert somebody.
Yeah, that's very much why my husband Artie never felt, he wouldn't describe it, I've talked to him about this extensively, he wouldn't describe it as always feeling unsafe with him, but he's always felt uncomfortable with his stepdad. And it's why he joined the military, to get out of there. What does Lucifer stand for? Large binocular telescope near infrared spectroscopic utility. So large utility with camera and integral field unit for extragalactic research. So it's aliens.
They were fighting to turn that one into an acronym.
Yeah. Like there's like 5 words between the L and the U. But yeah, he's always felt uncomfortable with him. He's always felt like he couldn't be himself around him. And it's very much coming from a place of judgment. My father-in-law loves heavy metal and like has taken my husband to concerts, like Slayer concerts specifically, where they have a pentagram made of flame on stage. And like, that's not satanic because he likes it. But then he'll talk shit about Lil Nas X for doing the exact same thing that Slayer's doing. Yeah. But he's gay and black. So that's a problem, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's insane. And like, he just thinks he gets to decide what's allowed to be exceptions based on whether or not he likes it and what's not. My husband has a gay biracial little cousin. So it's one of his cousin's children. And this kid is an accomplished musician. He is in an incredibly lucrative college major, and is successful by every metric. And my father-in-law will sit there and just talk about how there's something wrong with this kid.
The boy, right?
Okay, so he's biracial and queer.
Yeah.
He didn't ask for...
There's something wrong with this kid. What could it be?
Yeah.
Let's check his bingo sheet.
And I used to try to, like, appeal to my father-in-law. Like, I sent him an email, like, I understand that you don't get it, but I'm hoping if you get to know me, maybe we can at least come to some kind of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And he would ignore that, but then he would send me letters about how I need to be a wife and mother. When Chris and I got married with him knowing fully who I am, he wants kids less than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, have you ever talked to your stepson about what he wants? Because, like, who are you to decide what a relationship should look like? And it just got to be like, I didn't feel safe because he told me I deserved to die. And he also gave me a gift of a gun. Like, he welcomed me to the family by giving me a gun, which I have since sold legally. But, like, you welcomed me to the family by giving me a gun, and then within a few months told me I deserved to die. And, like, what kind of message is that supposed to send? And he's made religion and politics his entire personality. So, like, that is just entirely just wrapped up in religiosity. So that's, like, my first real experience with religious trauma is exclusively through my father-in-law. My mother-in-law has been great. She gave us a pride ornament for our first Christmas together. Every time one of us has a birthday, she sends us, like, these amazing sugar cookies in rainbow tins. Like,
that's cute.
Super sweet. She doesn't understand a lot, but, like, she is doing her best, and she loves her son. And all she cares about is that he believes in Jesus, which he's, like, on the border of agnostic and Christian. But he's very much anti-organized religion because of having family members who experienced predators within the church. He just does not trust organized religion, and I think that's fine. And I think he has, you know, I honor and value his beliefs. They are not my beliefs. I am pretty firmly atheist, and if there is a higher power for me, it's the idea that there is good in people, and that hopefully there's more goodness than badness in the world, and, like, that's kind of what I value and honor. But it's looking like, after last night, my mother-in-law is very much like, my husband wants to control me and wants to control my relationship with my kid, but I'm not going to let what he has done with his kids happen to me and my only child and the person that he loves. So that's my not very well organized current status of religious trauma.
This shouldn't have to, like, stand out, but that's really nice that her love for her child is more important than, like, other things in the world. Like,
yeah,
why is that so rare?
She's so worried about his, like, eternal fate, which is fair. Because, like, in her world, in her context, like, that is the most important thing. But she's also worried about him being happy. And that shouldn't be exceptional for a parent to want their child to be happy. And, like, her husband's obsession with us having a sexual fetish is so strange because, like, we don't, but even if we did, we're not involving other people in our sex life. So, like, why should that matter to him? Like, why is he so obsessed with our sex life that is non-existent? It creeps me out.
Something going on.
Yeah. But, like, the fact that he's brought up our sex life to me on multiple occasions when we don't even have an open level of dialogue. He's also texted me from his wife's phone. Like, when he told me I deserved to die, that was from his wife's phone. So now I have both of their numbers blocked, which really sucks because I love my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
I have never said a bad word about her. I feel for her because her husband sucks, but I don't think that's her fault. I think he was probably very good to her until he knew that he had her where he wanted her. And now he's kind of trying to isolate her from her child just because we are horrible satanic gays. But whatever. It's her life.
Yeah. He just assumes that she's not going to leave him. Like, he assumes that she's going to choose him over everybody else, including her own child, which is, I mean, the confidence.
He's very women are property, and he doesn't, this is my assumption to be clear, but I don't think he thinks she has value outside of him. And I think, especially because like my husband never knew his dad. And when she told me about when he was born, she seemed apologetic to me that he never knew his dad. And I was just like, why would I be mad that you didn't let a shitty guy be around your kid and that you happened to give birth to my favorite human on earth? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And like, you were an adult and you had him and you took the best care of him that you could and you were good to him. And so like, why are you sorry to me? And like, you shouldn't even be sorry to him. You know, like, it is what it is. But I just feel like he and the evangelical church has her brainwashed to feel like she's got all these strikes against her that I don't agree that she has strikes against her, except maybe her husband, but that's not her fault. But it was just like, I just get the sense that he thought that he wanted her to think she couldn't do any better, but that she had no value without him, so she might as well marry him. And I just hope that she's happy. I hope that she can find happiness because she is a sweet woman. She just wants to love. And she's very much just like, Jesus tells me to love, I'm going to love. And like the Bible should be. The Bible's so clear that like God's the only judge. And if you judge others, you will be judged to that same degree. Mm-hmm. And like, what's he setting himself up for at the pearly gates? Because it's a lot. And meanwhile, I think if there's a heaven, she's going to get in no problem. But I don't understand. Christianity is supposed to be about love. At least that's what I learned.
Mm-hmm. I've kind of, like, I've figured out in adulthood, and part of this came, like, after leaving church, but also, like, through the process of, like, getting a religion major and just doing a lot of study on my own and everything. I realized that, like, the one Bible verse from, I want to say, Leviticus or something, that was always used against me, like, by my dad and other people when I was a kid, which it basically says, like, if a man wears women's clothing, vice versa, you're an abomination to God. Mm-hmm. I know the word abomination is the word that was used on me, but I've learned that, like, that is the only verse. There's nothing else that I can think of. And like, funny thing about like using Bible verses to like attack people like that, but also encouraging them to read the Bible is like, I've probably read the Bible 100+ times or whatever. And so like, I've been through it a lot and I know that there's not other stuff in there. Same thing like for being gay or any other
one verse.
Yeah, it's always like one Bible verse. And they never bother to do any of the, like, actually look into what it's really saying or do any kind of interpretation. And I used to get a lot of TikToks from this one woman who is like, she's a Reformed Jew. I don't know if she is a rabbi or just like a scholar or what, but she like knew everything about the Torah. Like she was very like scholarly, and she would just go through the Torah and bring up like a different passage all the time. And she would like do lives and like also just like regular TikToks where she would just like pick a section and go through it and explain like what it was really saying and stuff like that. And then, so one time I like randomly scrolled by her doing one of these and it was about that Bible verse that was always used against me to like say that I'm an abomination and everything. And she was like talking about what the actual like meaning behind that was, like what that was actually saying. And it was for a very specific reason, which is like, I think the story was basically like during the various battles and stuff, a lot of the men, when they were supposed to be fighting, would like steal the clothes or whatever of the women in the village that they were invading and basically like try to look like they weren't like a soldier or
So they
whatever
could get
like
out of
that.
fighting.
Like they were doing it to like get out of fighting. And like the whole, if you take the context and like the original Hebrew and you like actually do the work to say like, what is this actually saying? It's basically saying like you're doing this thing to be a coward and get out of doing your like war duty or whatever. And like that was the thing that was so offensive, wasn't like you're wearing the wrong clothing or whatever. It's just saying like you're cowering away from fighting with the other men or something
Yeah,
like
like
that.
you need to keep your honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I guess the point is like people aren't referencing scriptures, Bible verses, or whatever to actually explain to you or themselves like why this is a bad thing or a sin or whatever. It's just like they have an opinion that they need to express and they come across a Bible verse and it sounds like the thing that they want to say. And then that's like their new favorite thing to quote all the time.
Yeah. The Bible verse my father-in-law quoted, which was like, man shall not lie with another man. In the original text, it was man shall not lie with boy, because during this time in ancient Greece, there was a practice called pederasty, where an adult, like older man would have like a barely pubescent boy that he would keep as a significant other / sexual release, because in those times, women weren't considered good enough to have conversations with. So like the women were for just having kids with, and then their real relationships would be with these young boys, because they were like at the intersection of being able to have a conversation, but also looking feminine enough. And I was like, that isn't against gays, it's against pedophilia.
Yeah, exactly. Which like
it said man and boy.
That's something some of the people in my church read.
Yeah.
Seriously.
But when I told my father-in-law that, he was like, stop listening to the liberal communist woke media. And it's like, sure, those things might describe me, but it's also called having critical thinking and understanding context.
Yeah. Like, I didn't get this from like the woke liberal media. I got this from like biblical scholar or
exactly.
something.
I've watched so many videos from biblical scholars, like Christian biblical scholars, a lot of Jewish biblical scholars, like Torah scholars. Like there's so many people who specialize in what did the original text say. I think a lot of the Old Testament was actually originally in Greek. So there's people who understand Greek, Hebrew, and English.
It was the Old Testament, mostly Hebrew with some Aramaic. New Testament was mostly Greek.
Yeah.
I took Greek in college. It was interesting.
That's awesome.
It was really interesting because I took a couple Greek courses in college, and this was when I was still like very involved in my church group in college, still doing a lot of like Bible studies and stuff like that. And because I was taking this class, like I would just for fun when I was doing my Bible studies and stuff, whatever like passage I was reading, I would like read it in like my standard translation I would read. Then I would pull up like a couple different translations because I knew more of the history of like where different translations were coming from and stuff like that. So I'd like look it up in a few different translations, and then I would pull up like the original Greek and read that. And not that I was fluent in Greek, but I knew enough to be able to like ID a lot of the words and just like the sentence structure and stuff. That was extremely enlightening, just seeing the original language versus the common translation versus a bunch of other translations. Just seeing how you translate and like rephrase things basically affects so much of what the meaning is. And that's without even going into like what's the history and context of this thing that they're talking about.
Yeah, like most scripture exists like the scripture that tells you how to live and what to do and not to do. That was about keeping people alive in a time where a lot of things were illegal that aren't illegal now, or just not safe. Like things about not eating pork is, some people think it's because back then they didn't know like the proper cooking temperature to kill diseases and parasites, and pork tends to have like the most.
Mm-hmm.
And same with shellfish. There's like toxic algae that makes shellfish poisonous. And like so much of these scriptures that people try to use against our communities are based on a very specific period of time with a very specific amount of knowledge and laws that were relevant. That, like, if you want to honor those as part of your own cultural or religious practice, that's up to you. But that doesn't mean that other people can't choose otherwise. And that doesn't mean you're going to be a horrible person.
We can get into what our like current religious status is or whatever. I guess you kind of like said before. But for me, like, I'm not like actively religious. I went through like my like various phases of deconstruction, whereas like so hardcore against everything for like a little bit and kind of worked through a lot of things. And like at this point, I'm like not actively religious, but I'm like not against religion at all. Like, and I know a lot of really good people, including my partner, who still have like strong religious beliefs and everything. And a lot of them are fantastic people.
Oh, yeah.
And like, it's not the religion itself that causes people to be terrible people. It's just like some people are terrible and they use their religion as like a justification.
Yeah,
like, oh, it's
like
because of
a
God.
tool.
Like, it's not because of God. It's because of you. So like, I'm not like actively religious, but I think I've deconstructed a lot of stuff at this point that I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm like, a lot of these scriptures and stuff that were used against me, like we were talking about a couple of those Bible verses, I've like emotionally processed through that stuff. And like, it's not because of the Bible or whatever. It's just because of how people were using it against me and everything. So I have no issue with religion in general at this point. It would be a very complicated proposition for me to like go to church and stuff at this point, because like at this point in my transition, I think I'm like pretty obviously trans, and it would be hard for me to like hide that. Not that I would ever do that for the sake of like going to a church. I would like have to find a church that's like very queer affirming and everything, which does exist. It's not the default by any means, but if that's something that you want or need to find, then that is an option, but it would take a lot of work to find that. And then I feel like I would still always be self-conscious about how people were looking at me and thinking about me and everything.
Unitarian Universalist churches, like you could be any belief system and they tend to be a lot more accepting, but those aren't as common.
I guess my point is like, if you are like still religious and are looking for those communities, they exist. You just gotta like kind of work and look around for it, and kind of like suss it out and like look at how many pride flags they have up.
Yeah. And check out their website to see like if they have a firm stance. I've considered, and even talked to a rabbi, but I've considered converting to Reform Judaism. But I have some reservations with certain current events and whether or not my stances would be welcome. But like, I've talked to a rabbi and they were totally cool with my, like, I don't know if I believe in God, a being, but I do believe in like a higher power being the sense of goodwill among people and trying to do good to others and make the world a better place. And like the rabbi I talked to seemed really cool with that. And I would love that sense of community and like finding people who have similar values to you in that way. But I've got some stances and opinions that I'm not sure would be that cohesive. And also the rabbi wanted me to leave the house, and I'm bad at that. Unless I'm going to someone's house where I'm comfortable, which was the main reason why I didn't start a couple years ago.
Yeah. it's hard enough for us to find safe spaces without bringing like religion and stuff like that into the mix, especially if you have either religious trauma or trauma from people who happen to be religious. Like I would still get triggered a lot, I think, just from being in a church. But I'm sure it's something that I like could work through or whatever, but it's complicated.
It is. This is going to be our longest episode, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's totally fine too.
Yeah.
We really ran the gamut. Well, yeah, like I said, when we were prepping for this is like the one episode we've done that we basically didn't prep for it. Like I have my notes here. By the way, this is like very much just the vibe of the whole podcast. Like my show notes here, this is just my journal.
Yeah.
And so like if you flip through here, go back a couple pages, it's like my therapy notes and like all kinds of stuff. So, but anyway, the show notes from today specifically says we could use more notes, but I could also rant for 10 hours without notes if you get me going. And that's what we're doing. So
yeah, and Robin said that to me last night, and I was just like, I have no notes. I think I said I'm coming in hot, stupid, and authentic.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the moral of the story.
All right.
Should we wrap up?
Yeah. Do you want to close us out in a moment of prayer?
Yes. Please, my brethren and sistren, if that's a word, and sibren, join us on our Discord. Find us on YouTube or Spotify, depending on, where you're listening to this now. Give us a like, subscribe, give us a 5-star review. We love you very much. Share your trans moments of joy with us.
All the links to all of the socials and everything, just go in the episode description. We're going to fully load that with every way you can connect to us, because we're all about community and sharing everybody else's stories. These episodes aren't all going to be about Ben and my personal stories, but there's so much that we want to share. So please share your stories with us, and we really want to elevate trans voices.
And let us know if you want to be a guest.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been your religiously traumatized Ben.
I have been your religiously traumatized Robin.
And this is Ben and Robin Are Trans.
We'll see you all next time.
Bye.
Bye. Nice. Everything is fully armed and operational, so we can do the thing whenever.
Okay. Do I have a throat burp? I don't think I have a throat burp.
No judgment if you do. This is quality podcasting. Any goofy mess ups just become fun outtakes that end up on the podcast anyway. So it's like win-win.
Win-win-win.